Yo, quick little fun fact about me. I have a degree in psychology. Right after I got out of high school, I went to York University and I graduated in 2023 with a degree in psychology. If it wasn't for YouTube, I probably still would have been studying to become a therapist or a researcher by now. But thank God that YouTube ended up working out, because in the last year of university, I realized I didn't want to do that. For a couple reasons that you're gonna find out in this video. But back when I was in school, there was a few studies that I vividly recall that stuck with me, mainly because of how messed up and how unethical they were. Today, we're gonna go through those unethical dark experiments. Alright, let's do this. I'm letting you know right now, some of the experiments I'm going to mention, you're not even gonna think they're real. You're gonna think I'm making it up, from how unbelievably absurd and messed up they are. To mention real quick, what are you eating? None of these practices exist anymore. Research studies and experiments cannot be conducted unless they pass an ethics review. All of these studies I'm about to mention are before the ethics review became a thing. So before, back in the day, you know what people used to do? People used to literally just wake up and be like, I'm gonna go traumatize some children today for a psychological experiment. Nowadays, fortunately, psychologists can't just wake up and decide to traumatize a few kids on a random Tuesday. Like, for example, there's this one experiment conducted by this guy, Wendell Johnson, and his graduate student, Mary Tudor, back in 1939, called the Monster Study. Sounds very welcoming. The goal of the study was to see if stuttering
Bro, damn.
is something that can be learned rather than stuttering happening as a result of something physical or neurological. So this guy, Wendell, Mary, and their research team went to an orphanage in Iowa where children don't have any parents, so their parents cannot give consent on behalf of the kids. Already off the rip, they're experimenting on kids who already don't have families. So the consequences for their actions on what they're about to do to these children are less. So they took 22 of these orphan children and they split them into 4 groups, and they would have them read from a children's book. Group 1's children would receive positive reinforcement even when they stuttered. So Group 1's kids already had stuttering issues, but when they would stutter as they read, they would get praised. The researchers would be like, "Oh, good job, good boy, you did so well for reading. You know how to read so good. You're so smart. You're so brave. How'd you get this smart?" That's basically how the researchers would treat these orphans, even when they would mess up their reading. Group 2's children was the dark side. The children in Group 2 already had bad stuttering issues. So anytime the children would stutter, they would criticize the shit out of them. They would be like, "Oh, you can't read. You're worthless. You're gonna fail in life. This is why nobody loves you." I'm exaggerating, but they would make them feel like shit about their stuttering, even when it was just a tiny little stutter / mistake in their reading. Group 3 was calm. Those kids had no stuttering issues, they would read normally, and they would receive praise. Now, Group 4 is where this entire experiment took a crazy dark turn. They took kids who had no stuttering issues, and they would have them read out of a children's book. And as they would read, even when they wouldn't mess up, the instructors would yell at them. They'd be like, "Why don't you know how to read? Did your parents not teach you how to read? What's wrong with you?" Basically just negatively reinforcing these children so badly, even though they had no issues. The psychologists would obliterate them, make them cry, give them such terrible negative reinforcement even though they had no issues. So the result of the experiment, Group 1's kids slightly improved their fluency and they gained more confidence. They stuttered less and they became more comfortable when they were speaking even though they had stutters. Group 2's kids, their stutters became even worse. They lost confidence, they became anxious, some of them even cried. It's just bad news. I mean, of course, you yell at a kid, you make a kid cry for making the tiniest mistake. What do you expect to happen? Group 3 is the same as Group 1. You know, they felt a little better about themselves, naturally. And now Group 4, oh boy. The result of what happened with Group 4, I believe, is 25% responsible for why there even is an ethics review in psychology studies now. The kids who never had any stuttering issues developed stuttering problems. They became more hesitant, they became more quiet, they developed a fear of speaking, they stopped speaking in class, they became unsociable, and they followed up, years later to see how Group 4 was doing and the rest of the groups. And the kids who never had a stutter prior to the experiment all had, or a lot of them, had speaking issues after all those years later. So this psychology experiment left a scar on these children for the rest of their lives. Now, the takeaway from this experiment. Number 1, I am sweating. Adults criticizing and praising children both have extreme consequences, negative and positive. If you positively reinforce, why am I even wearing a hoodie? If you positively reinforce a kid for doing a good job, you boost their confidence. If you negatively reinforce a child for doing a bad job, you destroy his confidence, especially in the regards of when both groups of children are trying their best. So to simplify that even further, let's say I'm 6 years old and I'm reading. I'm trying my best. If I get praised, being like, oh, you do such a good job reading, I'm so proud of you, you're such a fast learner, I'm gonna feel better about myself and I'm gonna become an even better reader. But if I'm trying my best and I'm getting negatively reinforced and criticized and bashed, telling me, you can't read, you're absolute garbage, you're worthless, I should throw you up in the air and tornado kick you across the head. If I'm receiving that language, what's gonna happen to me? I'm gonna become anxious. I'm not gonna want to experience those words. So I'm gonna be so focused on not messing up that I become anxious. This experiment barely scratches the surface on how bad some experiments are out there. This experiment was really bad. It's one of the most controversial experiments in all of psychology history. But the experiment that I'm about to tell you completely makes this psychology experiment look like it's nothing. And that says a lot, because that experiment was really bad. This next study I'm about to tell you is by far, without a doubt, the darkest child psychology experiment ever conducted in modern history. That's at least known to the public, or rather, partially known to the public. You've never heard about this experiment because the people involved all deliberately tried to sweep this under the rug, and they tried to completely delete it out of history, or hide it as much as possible so the world doesn't end up finding out about how utterly insane this experiment is. They wanted to protect everybody involved, all the psychologists, all the departments involved, but no, we're not having that. I'm not having that. So I'm gonna give you a quick warning. Click away if you are somebody who is sensitive to subjects that involve unaliving. I have other videos on my channel that you could watch. You don't need to watch this. I'm gonna give you 5 seconds, okay? Make a decision. Okay, I'll tell you. Everybody, take a long, good look at this guy. His name is John Money. When you Google him, you don't see anything bad about him. You see his accomplishments, you see his psychological achievements, you see what he's done, you see what he's researched, but you don't see anything about the most controversial study probably on Earth. So who is this Donnie, whose last name is literally Money? His backstory is important. He is the founder of the first gender identity clinic in the world, and he is basically who started that entire movement. He was born in New Zealand and he moved to the US in the 1940s, where he earned his PhD from Harvard. This guy believed that gender identity is a result of society and not something that is fixed at birth. A child's sense of male or female comes from their environment and their upbringing, and not their biology. That was his whole point. So he believed that if a child's gender was reassessed at an early age, ideally before the ages of 2 to 3 years old, so being literally an infant, then the children could successfully be raised being the opposite gender without having any identity problems come up. Because the point would be, it would never be known to them. It'll be all they ever knew. So he's basically implying here that if the earliest memories of a child's life is when they are the opposite gender, then they have no reason to think that they're anything other than what they are, basically manipulating them to an extent. Now, the reason why this is so controversial is because John Money promoted these ideas so aggressively with so much force, and he would literally contradict himself and his own beliefs. And he would delusionally still aggressively push out these ideas, reassessing children and even infants as far as he possibly could to prove that he was right. So he had all these ideas in his brain, but they were just ideas and theories. None of it was proved yet. So to prove to the world that he was right and that he wasn't crazy, he decided to conduct an experiment. That way his results would shut everybody up and nobody would think he's crazy anymore. So everybody, meet David Reimer. David was born as Bruce Reimer in 1965, and he had a twin brother named Brian. When they were babies, they both had something called phimosis. I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm not gonna talk about what phimosis is, but long story short, they both needed to undergo surgery in their manhood area. So Bruce had to go first, and bear in mind, they were like 8-9 months old. They were literally babies. While Bruce was undergoing the surgery, one of the doctors messed up and accidentally burned off his, or a part of his, trying to stay PG here, basically burned his manhood to the point of no return as a baby. It was the doctor's mistake. So the twins' parents, naturally, were devastated. I mean, naturally, one of their babies just got struck with irreversible damage to the point of no return. Any parent would be devastated. So one day they were just sitting down watching TV, being very upset, and then they saw on the TV John Money. John Money told the parents that Bruce could successfully be raised as a girl. So the experiment began. They renamed Bruce to Brent. They would dress up Bruce as a girl, and they never told Bruce the truth. They ended up performing surgery on him to, remove the rest of his manhood and switch him to the other side. So fast forward 7 years later, Bruce, aka Brenda, is now 7 years old. Bruce and Brian were taken to John Money's clinic to do some psychosexual sessions with John Money. And then this is where it gets completely insane. They showed the children explicit content at the age of 7 years old, and they basically forced the children to do things to each other, their siblings and their children. And they also asked extremely inappropriate, explicit questions to these children, forcing answers out of them for the sake of their experiment. The whole purpose of any of these sessions was to reinforce Bruce's female identity. But here's the problem. Bruce never felt like a girl. He refused to wear dresses. He refused to play with dolls. He liked playing with male toys, he preferred sports, and he was bullied in school for reasons that were related to the issue. He became socially awkward, and at home, he resisted being associated with being a female. But Dr. Money insisted in all of the academic papers that the reassessment was a success, even though everything was pointing in the direction that it was not a success. So he fabricated the information on the documents and on the academic papers, saying, "It was great, I was right, all of you were crazy, I was the one who was in the right and you're all in the wrong. Boom, 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 sucks to suck." Fast forward some time later, Bruce is now 13 years old, and he is extremely depressed. His parents told him the truth about how he was actually born as a boy, and they decided to make him female upon Dr. Money's recommendations. And from that point onward, Bruce decided that he wanted to live as a male again, taking on the name David. But the issues about his mental health never went away, and his twin brother, Brian, also experienced those same similar feelings. It carried on to adulthood. Bruce ended up marrying a woman and he became the stepfather of her children, but he continuously carried these mental scars alongside him. And his twin brother. Think about the last experiment that I talked about with the monster study. What happens to children when they experience traumatic things at a young age? It carries on to adulthood, especially if it's not dealt with and taken care of in the right way. The last kids ended up having a stutter for the rest of their lives. Dr. Money made these kids do things to each other as siblings, showed them explicit content, lied to David for 13 years of his life, basically making him believe that everything that he thought he was completely falsified. Also, Dr. Money could basically lie about his theories being whatever it is. David's twin brother, Brian, unalived himself in 2002, and David followed 2 years later at the age of 38 in 2004. Rest in peace to the both of them. John Money cited in his work that the gender theory was a success, influencing real-world medical decisions for other children. But the truth ended up emerging in 1990, so much later on. I'm gonna have to sit down as a result of that. Actually unreal. I remember when I had first heard about this, I was like in shock. And the more research that I looked into, the more upset I became. I did have 3 other studies that I was going to talk about in this video, but that was too heavy of an experiment and a story for me to just continue on this video. I'm going to end the video here. I might do a part 2 talking about the other psychology experiments. We'll see. I don't know. Go watch my other videos if you want. I'll see you later.